All right, so namaste everyone. My name is Nikunj Trivedi. I'm the president of CoHNA, the Coalition of Hindus of North America, which is a grassroots Hindu advocacy and civil rights organization. We have members and volunteers from all different types of backgrounds, and we are located in the United States and Canada. We also work and coordinate with other organizations around the world. CoHNA's mission is to provide, to advocate for a better understanding of Hinduism within North America as well as around the world, and advocate for the rights and interests of Hindus in North America and worldwide. You can learn more about CoHNA at cohna.org and follow us on our social media handles at CoHNA Official. And with that, what I would like to do is introduce today's session. Today's session is going to focus on the recent caste policies that have been passed within UC Davis and the Cal State University system. And that has caused a lot of different types of conversations around it. What are the impacts of it? Why is it problematic? What are some of the concerns that parents should be aware of, that students should be aware of, as well as the community members should be aware of? And what can we do about it? We will also be hearing stories from students who are concerned about this because they are directly impacted by these types of policies. We also have with us one of our CoHNA volunteers and a Dalit activist, Sri Aldrin Deepak Ji. Aldrin Ji has been a key volunteer for CoHNA, and he has been very active in voicing his opinions as perspective on this particularly important topic. So we will be hearing from him as well, his experience in this entire process so far, when he has tried to speak up about his perspective and the types of challenges that he has faced. And of course, we have Dr. Indu Vishwanathan. She's the co-director of Understanding Hindu Phobia Initiative, and an educator and a scholar. Dr. Vishwanathan is going to be giving us as an overview about what is really going on, because a lot of parents are really confused about what the situation is, or they're not even aware of what's going on and why should they care. So we'll be talking about some of that. And then towards the end, we'll be hearing from the students who are going to be sharing their perspective. Just so everyone knows, the student identities will not be revealed because they are concerned about being targeted on campuses. Some of them already face some targeting in whether it's on social media or other places. But these are students that we are in touch with. They do belong to these universities where these policies have been passed. So we'll be hearing from them. And I'm going to welcome Dr. Indu Vishwanathan to give us an overview as to why are we here today and what is the background. So Induji, please go ahead.
Namaste. Thank you, Nikunji, for the introduction and for inviting me to speak here. I'm really grateful to be speaking here today. Let me just share my screen. Okay. UC Davis and the Cal State University system recently added caste as a protected category in their anti-discrimination policies. Why is this a problem? Publicly funded institutions like Cal State and UC Davis are required by law to uphold Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which protects students of any religion from discrimination, including harassment based on a student's actual or perceived shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics, or citizenship or residency in a country with a dominant religion or distinct religious identity. All forms of categorical discrimination, race, gender, etc., that are covered by laws like the Civil Rights Act reflect a long, well-documented history of institutionalized discrimination in and by the United States, reflected in amendments to the Constitution, etc. There is no such rigorous documentation of institutionalized discrimination in and or by the United States vis-a-vis caste. The decision to push these policies forward rests almost exclusively on Equality Lab's 2018 caste survey. Understanding Hindu Phobia's co-director, Dr. Parth Parihar, points to three prominent and troubling methodological flaws in the study. One, the study employs no clearly articulated definition of caste-based discrimination. This means that survey respondents could report any event or phenomenon as caste-based discrimination, and it was recorded and tallied as such without any benchmarks or thresholds in place. Social science studies require clear definition of terms when measuring a phenomenon. Equality Labs used non-representative sampling. By only contacting their listservs and other organizations that support or endorse their point of view, there was a selection bias in the participant group. In fact, no major or minor Hindu American organization was contacted to participate in this survey study, despite Equality Lab's construction of caste-based discrimination as endemic to Hinduism. This kind of biased sampling is methodologically unsound and would not pass an ethics board or peer review. 3. Equality Labs misrepresents the overall findings. By weeding out any counter evidence, people who report no caste discrimination, and only amplifying testimonials that confirm their pre-existing conclusion, Equality Labs gives the impression that the testimonials they share are representative of the survey findings. This is intellectually dishonest and a false representation of findings. In fact, all other evidence that is presented in favor of US anti-casteism policies is similarly curated or unverified outlandish claims that can easily be debunked. In fact, there is insufficient evidence of systemic caste discrimination in the United States. The evidence offered overwhelmingly indicts the Hindu American community, actively erasing or underrepresenting caste discrimination within other religious communities from the diaspora, including Christian, Sikh, and Muslim. It draws a clear connection between caste oppression and Hinduism. So now, not only is this alleged categorical discrimination not sufficiently documented in the United States, it is ascribed to a particular religion, Hinduism. Moreover, a connection is drawn not only from unverified claims about Hindu Americans, but also to Indian religious politics. Hindu Americans are accused, without evidence, of importing the alleged benefits of Hindu demographic majoritism in India and spreading it onto US society. The language of disease is used to describe us. This echoes xenophobic rhetoric about dirty immigrants importing foreign diseases to the US, rhetoric which is very much a part of documented American history and institutions. UC Davis and Cal State's policies make caste the only protected category of discrimination that is not clearly defined, is unsubstantiated by sufficient evidence, implicates a specific theology as the cause of discrimination, has no history in the United States, and is actively xenophobic towards a specific nationality in direct violation of Title VI. And don't forget, the meta-narrative that rationalizes this is that Hindu Americans have successfully infiltrated American institutions to the extent that we can influence those institutions towards our nefarious agendas, which is exactly how anti-Semitism is constructed. Bear in mind, the scholars at the Dismantling Global Hindutva Conference who argued that Hinduism itself must be dismantled because it is inherently undemocratic and its sole purpose is to uphold caste discrimination, claim to be vulnerable underdogs who are threatened for speaking out, again, without providing substantiating evidence. Meanwhile, the Dismantling Global Hindutva Conference was sponsored by all of these institutions and centers. Supporting co-sponsors included and DGH scholars solicited and received the support from PEN America, 38 associations of scholars, the Association of Asian Studies, more than 1,100 academics, over 60 community organizations, the Critical Diasporic South Asian Feminisms Collective, Scholars of Genocide, Mass Violence, and Human Rights, and the National Confederation of Human Rights Organizations. In this environment, Hindu Americans must effectively advocate for our constitutional rights by engaging with public officials, public educators, and with other community-driven advocacy organizations, and effectively raise awareness within our own community that this dangerous Hinduphobic rhetoric has become normalized and is sanctioned by American institutions. In this environment, Hindu Americans must work together. This is an all hands on deck moment. Thank you, Nikunj.
Thank you very much for that. And indeed, it's an all hands-on moment, and this is why we're talking about this today, because what I would like to see is a start of a movement amongst Hindus to understand that this is not, it's almost like a pandemic, right? It's spreading in such a way that might not be controllable or addressable, because we just don't have the support system, nor do we have access to the narrative. Even when we try to bring our perspectives, we are considered upper caste. We are silenced, we are gaslighted, and we're basically shown that, oh, this is a bunch of upper caste people fighting against lower caste people, and there's a kind of an inherent problem in the United States. Concerns from India or policies from India are somehow being superimposed here, even on children who are born and raised in America, who have never ever been to India or understand anything about Indian politics or Indian social political issues, etc. So you're essentially looking at the Criminal Tribes Act that was passed in 19th century, that basically said that certain castes by birth are considered criminals or guilty of certain crimes. So this is a repeat of the same colonial nonsense that was imposed upon indigenous Hindu society or indigenous Indian society in the 18th and 19th century via British policies. So I personally see almost like a recolonization of the Hindus in California, and that's going to be continuing in other parts of the United States. And who knows, it may even come to Canada, etc. So without further ado, what I would like to do is, speaking of narrative, CoHNA is not an upper caste organization. Many times people have this confusion. They call us Savarnas, etc. But we have people from all different backgrounds. Just because we don't choose to identify ourselves as upper caste, Dalits, this and that, does not mean that we don't have people from all backgrounds. And one of our great volunteers who has been very sincere from months and months since he joined CoHNA is Sri Aldrin Deepakji. Sri Aldrin Deepakji is a Dalit Hindu activist and a member of the LGBTQ community. So he advocates for both of those communities. And his experience has shown the fact that anybody can be part of Hindu Dharma without sort of the systemic oppression that people talk about. However, one of the things that happens with Aldrinji is when he tries to talk about his Dalit perspective, he's often silenced in the media, or he's often silenced in some of these platforms and he's going to talk about some of that. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because there's a sort of a narrative that is being pushed from one end, but there is no equal level playing field. So the idea for us through the Hindu Parents Network and through CoHNA is to provide that level playing field and provide a diverse set of voices in this particular conversation around caste. So Aldrinji, I wanted to ask you, can you share, first of all, your perspective on this particular issue? We'll start there first.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, namaste everybody. I got involved with this one because of the Cisco case, but since we're talking about the universities, so 2 weeks ago there was a hearing in is that you see
CSU? Yeah, that was the CSU.
CSU. So when we went to the meeting, there were about 40 people on their side that were giving the statements, and then we were like 12 of us, and it was me, and there was another CoHNA member who was from Shudra class. But on the other side, and I'm just bringing this up because you just said about Savarna, and there were 35 of them. 30 of them were Savarna, sitting and talking about Dalits, and I was just wondering how come, and they all said that we are Savarnas and we oppress the Dalits in America, and all of these kids were born and raised in America, and I don't know if they had suppressed so many Dalits. I was just surprised that they couldn't find one Dalit that they had suppressed, that they could, bring them to give a statement saying that, oh, this is the person that I suppressed. Now we want to make up to you. So please, speak for yourself. There were not one. So that was my very strange thing for me. And I was sitting there going, you're suppressing everybody. I've lived in America for 32 years. And I haven't seen this one. And I was just shocked to see all of these people coming and saying, yeah, I come from Savarna and we have suppressed, and my family has suppressed. And I go, well, that must be very hard for you to grow up like that. And if you have a problem with that, then you should go to therapy and not use me as your therapy so that you can feel better about yourself. I mean, that was the strange thing that I was feeling while I was sitting and listening to these people talking about me, like I am a suppressed person, but they suppress me, and it was a very strange thing. So when you look at that, you realize how far this has gone from reality. Like I said, I've lived here for 32 years. I've had all people of all, I mean, we never ever asked anybody about their caste, or nobody ever asked me about my caste. Even in India, when I lived there, nobody ever asked me about my caste. And I had friends from all walks of life. So, and it was very strange to hear these kids who grew up in America. Where did they find this many Dalits? None, first of all, because it's hard for me to find Dalits to talk to, and they've obviously found so many of them to oppress. And then the other thing is that when they were talking about it, I don't think they understood what a caste means. I think they were told by somebody else to do this, because when you look at what a caste is in Indian perspective, it has nothing to do with America. Nobody ever brings it, and this has become like a very it's a conundrum, and I don't know how they are going to get away with it, because how are you going to? And one of the things that happened in Cisco case, I'm just going to bring that one just for the sake of telling what happened. Is one of the things that they mention is that all the Dalits are dark, oppressed, and uneducated. So my question was, like, in my family, I have people from all color range, right? So are you saying they cannot be my Dalits? So if they come to America and they are saying they're Dalit, then you're going to say no, you can't because you're dark skinned, because that's in the papers that they submitted to the court. So this has been this was I don't know if I wanted to cry or laugh when they were talking. So
yeah, and that's exactly what we tend to see. You know, this whole conflation of, you know, white and white versus black, or, you know, like dark skin versus light skin and things like that. And I can tell you, if you put 5, 10 brown people in the room and point to, say, hey, which one of these people do you think is low caste or upper caste? I can bet you most people won't recognize it, right? So,
no.
but you know, what I want to ask you a personal question, right? When you joined CoHNA, what was your experience? You know, because as I mentioned, as one of the organizations that just started 2 years ago, when you joined CoHNA, you actually were, you know, you became a key part of being a volunteer for us. So tell us a little bit about your experience with us in CoHNA.
So I mean, I've been, you know, keeping myself up to date with what's going on because I'm part of the community. So when I started seeing this Cisco case, that's the first thing that made me, I have to join somewhere and be active about this, because there's something that's going on that, you know, this is very strange. So that's when I actually sent an email, and I was so pleasantly surprised that I got an email back. And it was, I think it was on a Sunday, and then Nikunji, you sent me an email saying that, oh, you can come and attend the voluntary meeting on Tuesday. And it was wonderful, and we had a great meeting, and we had the talks about many different things, including that particular time there was a hearing that was happening in Contra Costa County. So we talked about it, and I remember you guys were saying it's kind of hard because we don't know any Dalits, so we don't know how to go and support, because we don't want them to think that we're like, you know, Savarnas coming talking again. And I actually raised my hand and go, hello, it's me. You can talk. I can talk about that. I know in the beginning we never talked about it, but then I realized, like, well, I can be that person. I can be that voice. That's why I joined this, because I want to make sure that people hear both sides. You know, whatever your experience is, I don't want to minimize it, but you have to understand, I've lived here way before even caste was talked about in America. I lived here. I've met people. I mean, I was the only South Indian when I came here in 1987 that lived in San Francisco. Everybody else was from Northwest, wherever. I never had a problem. Nobody ever asked me where you are. I've been to their houses, so they've come to my houses. And so when I came to CoHNA, I just realized this was my home, because I felt so comfortable talking about issues, and you guys do such a wonderful job for the last 2 years that to be a part of it. it was great. And then we jumped in right away to that Contra Costa thing, and then it went from there. So it was a wonderful experience.
Yeah, no, of course. And one of the great things that you had done for us is when we launched the Diwali page, if you remember, like resources on Diwali, you had actually recorded a Diwali puja, and that is available on CoHNA's YouTube channel. And you were able to, do the puja, show the steps of the puja, and really it was for everybody, And I know you invite all kinds of people, whether they're Hindu or non-Hindu, to a grand Diwali program. And I know some of the students who have personally been there and benefited quite a bit from the way you do the puja, the way you explain Diwali puja, and it's really beautiful. So I really want to thank you for being part of our team, and really welcome everybody from different backgrounds who want to join CoHNA and really create a forum for people from all backgrounds. Now,
yes, please do join. Sorry, please do join. It's important that we become active. Sorry.
Yeah, no, and final question for you before we move on, and I'll hand it over to Induji afterwards. Final question for you is, let's talk about San Francisco Chronicle, right? If you remember, one of the things that we're trying to do is run a story on this whole caste issue, and they interviewed you, right? So what happened there?
Yes. So, well, it was kind of strange already by even from the get-go, right? So they were not sure. The person that wanted to interview, the person who really writes, wanted to interview, but somehow he bailed out. So somebody else who was the assistant wanted to talk. And then we made time, and then we did a Zoom session. And she asked all the questions. We went through, like, this has been my experience. And I mean, what they say, it does not make sense. I have not met anybody that has had this a problem, because I've been to temple in Livermore. I've participated in pujas. I've gone even to when they did the archana, and I didn't know what my nakshatra was and what gotra that I belonged to, and then the pujari was very gracious, and then said nakshatra, Shubharashi, and then I was blessed, and then I walked out. I mean, I never had any of the problems. So I was explained to this lady, this is our community that supporting us being here. And by doing this kind of thing, you're just dividing people without even knowing what you're doing. You're trying to, I explained to her, like the British came, and they said that they were going to civilize the savages, and as soon as they came in, they put in Indians and dogs are not allowed in every building. Now I feel the same thing. Suddenly now you want to civilize us because we are so uncivilized. Now you want to put a label on me. I never had to come out and say Dalit to anybody in my entire life. Now you're forcing me to come out and say to people I'm a Dalit now. You wanted to save me from this problem. Now you're giving me a problem and labeling me, and I have to now walk around saying, oh, by the way, I'm Dalit.
Yeah.
This is the conundrum that and we talked about it, and she took everything that I spoke to, and we said, oh, we'll let you know. And we never heard from them. Never.
Yeah. And that's the whole point. So essentially what this is, the reason we brought this up is because this is how legitimate voices are silenced by the media, right? The media, like the San Francisco Chronicle, was only interested in showing one side, to peddle a narrative, to show that all Dalits feel one way, while we have people within CoHNA and outside who can say, no, my lived experience and my experience has been very different. That doesn't mean that discrimination did not happen or doesn't happen. That's a reality of society, but it's not one of those things that's just, one way or the other. It's not a black and white. It's not this dichotomy. There is a lot of gray area. There are mixed experiences, mixed lived experiences. And so thank you very much, Aldrinji, for sharing your thoughts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over to Dr. Indu Vishwanathan. I'm going to bring in the students. So the next section of this is going to be a conversation with the students who have certain concerns about what's going on and the impact on them. And I think this is something that parents need to really focus on and pay attention to. So I'm going to bring these students in. Let me just make them panelists.
While you're bringing them in, Nikunjji, I just have one question for Aldrinji, if he doesn't mind answering. I'm just curious to know what the response is from some of these activists that you've met who are pushing these policies when you explain to them the harm that these policies are causing. What kind of response do you get from folks?
I think they just listen to us so that they can say that we listen to you. I think they're unaware. You know what I mean? In order for you to help somebody, you need to have a empathy of what they've been through. These people have no clue of what the experience of Dalit has been. And like I said, there were 30 people who claimed themselves to be Savarna. How are you talking for me? How are you talking for the people that you say you're oppressed? Isn't that some kind of oppression yourself doing now? Not bringing these people who you say who have no voice. Why don't you bring them and have them sit there and let them tell their story? Why is it that you are coming and telling? What is making you now somehow the authority on what a Dalit is going through, what Dalit's needs are? How do you know that? Now, how is that going to work out when a person works in a company? But you know that the problem with that is fair is fair. Like what Nikunji said, oppression happens, we have to condemn it and should be severely punished with the extent of law. But the point is now, what if I am a person of not such a good nature, and if I want to take advantage of a person, I don't need to prove anything. All I have to say is you discriminated against me because I'm a Dalit. Now, how are you going to prove that? How are you going to prove that I'm not a Dalit? And what Dalit is, that's another problem. So one caste in one particular state is higher than the other caste. The ones that you call Shudra or Dalit are not in another state. So how is this going to work? This is the most dangerous thing that they do. I don't think they thought about it in the jail to be honest. I really don't think they know anything about it. It's just a bunch of kids. I'm sorry, I'm going to say this because it's just a bunch of kids that got influenced by whoever wants to do their good deed for the time that they're living. I'm sorry, I feel so hurt, and it's very emotional for me. I am very upset with this because this is really going to affect us. It's going to affect all of us, not just me. Just as a community, there's going to be a black dot on us. It's like, oh, easy, now if these people are going to be educated like this, can you imagine every Indian that's going to end up in school, especially if the students are coming from America to university, already the white people, they go for 2 weeks, they stay in 5-star hotels, they come back and they go, oh yeah, I went to visit India. There's caste system. It's really, they don't even know what the hell that is, but they come and say that. Can you imagine now the institutionalized people, what they're going to do? And that's the scary part.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate everything that you're saying. And what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, what you're hearing is that there's no recognition of the harm that's being caused by this.
Yes, absolutely.
And that it is, in your view, it is causing harm.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, can you imagine now, now I'm forced to say I'm a Dalit. I mean, I told my friends, hey, I have to tell you this because now I'm going to be, going around telling people. And they were like, this is ridiculous. Nobody could understand what the hell is going on. Like, I never had to tell anybody, ever. And imagine that, like, I'm really blessed that everybody is okay. Now, can you imagine a new person meeting a new person in America in 5 years of this nastiness going on? How tippy-toeing that could be? Yeah. I don't see anything good coming out of it. It's not like they say pathway to hell is paved with good intentions,
Yeah. Just one more follow-up question. In your experience in speaking about this and engaging with people, what has been the response from non-Hindus or non-South Asians, sort of, other Americans, when you say, actually, this doesn't represent something good for me at all? How do they respond to it?
Oh, they understand, because see, they see the thing about outsiders is that in Americans in general, I'm sure if they meet a real Dalit, even these kids who is going around saying that I'm a Savarna and I oppress also, if they met a real Dalit in their life, a real Dalit who lived their life and who had their life and whatever it is, and then we have a conversation as equal, I don't think you would think like that. You see, this is you're so far removed. You're sitting in your equality labs and writing down theses and whatnot, and of my life, and thinking that you know better than me. But when Vikunji said, I have Diwali puja in my house every Diwali, Lakshmi puja, and I have rangoli. I have huge rangoli. My friend, he's actually Filipino. He comes all the way from Hawaii. We spend 7 days getting ready for the puja. We do the whole Shodashopachara puja. And I invite like 50 people, and most of them are like non-Indians. Only few of my friends come because they do their own. So when they come, I talk about all of these things. And then this year was the first time I had to talk about the caste thing. And I had a Jewish neighbor who came. I had other my white friends that I never had told. And I basically told them, you know, you guys always talk about caste and you always say untouchable. You're sitting in front of one. But have you ever felt like what you would have thought untouchable would be after meeting me? And they were like, oh no, really? Oh no, that's. And so I educated them, and you can see they're like, oh, that's not good. That is not good. I mean, that's going to create a discrimination. You know, it's like the concentration camp for the Japanese because some Japanese did something bad, right? So yeah, I mean, I think they're more understanding than our brainwashed Indian so-called suburbs. It's incredible. And you know, I've gotten kicked out of somebody's house because of this. Because I told them this is what is happening and it's wrong and you need to stop. And you go, well, we can't be friends anymore. I'm like, okay, well, you know, you want to help me, but I'm telling you what I want help with, but you don't like it anymore. You know what I mean? So this is what is happening. You're gone so far, you don't even know the person that you're trying to help. You're kicking him out of your house.
Yeah. Wow. You're such an important and powerful voice for our community. So I just really want to thank you before I go on to asking questions of the students. So thank you so much for everything about you. I'm so inspired by you.
We all are.
Yeah. So are our students on now?
Yes, they're all there. Yes, they're all there.
Okay.
So please go ahead.
Sure. I just kind of wanted to open the floor for students. I mean, I did have some questions that I had kind of put together. But first, I think the first question is, when you first learned that this was happening, what was your response? What did you think and what did you do or say?
I think for me, I was honestly shocked because I feel like the CSU system makes it seem like we have a big part in what goes on in terms of campus. And I found out about this situation actually through someone who was not associated with the CSU system. So it was definitely very frustrating. It all sounded very ridiculous in my mind because I was like, who is going to be making these decisions? Like, if we ourselves as Hindus don't completely understand this, who is going to be the person that's educated enough to understand this so well? And as Deepak Ji said, different regions, right, being of a different caste will be lower in some areas and higher in others. So it honestly sounds really ridiculous, like there's nothing concrete to it, which is what confuses me.
Also adding on to that, I feel like a lot of the times it's really hard to determine someone's caste. So for me, a huge question was, how are people even going to be determining each other's caste? How are they going to verify it? How are they going to know whether or not somebody is telling the truth when it comes to their caste? Because there is no proper documentation of this and no way to truly prove this. So it was just very confusing to me on how they're even going to determine our castes in the first place, and whether or not this applies to all cultural castes or just Indian or like South Asian culture structured castes, because that's also something that is not clarified within the policy.
It's really unsettling to have heard about this not through the school and then having to hear from other individuals, because it kind of makes it clear that the CSU Board of Trustees may not be really keeping their students' best interests in mind. And that can be really hurtful and could honestly deter students from even applying to their universities. It's always American universities, I never thought like this was an issue that would come up here, being raised here. And now that it's coming up, it doesn't feel like a safe space anymore.
Do you feel like if you or when you have reached out to administrators that your concerns and your perspective are really heard?
So for us, we decided to send over an email, and this was written by students. We kind of just took together all of our perspectives, and we got a response, but it felt like a lawyer was writing it to us. It felt like this became completely ingenuine. I honestly don't think that the person who responded even took the time to read it. And it was very frustrating because it seems like they're taking our opinion as a complete joke and as something that's more political when we're genuinely concerned.
So the response that we got back kind of didn't make much sense to us personally. We read through it and there was nothing about having our voices heard or taking what we said into consideration. It was more like all they said was we're trying to make everything more fair on campus. We're trying to make everything more clear, but they didn't really give us any details or any ways to truly understand how they will be doing this or how it will genuinely help the community as a whole. And also, when they passed the CSU policy, they didn't really communicate with students that they were passing this. We had no idea about anything regarding this as well. So it was confusing that that was something that wasn't discussed with us at all as well.
With your permission, I have shared some excerpts from the letter, the boilerplate response that you received from administration. And you can see, based on the conversation we've had up until this point with everyone, that they haven't taken into account any concerns that come from the Hindu community at all, or from students. But everything is cloaked in the language of inclusion. As a public institution, our mission is to serve all of our students and employees so that they have a sense of belonging and can thrive. And the addition of caste is intended to remove any ambiguity. And what we're hearing from everyone on this panel is that it's actually created a lot of confusion because everything is actually very, very ambiguous. And there's not even a definition of caste discrimination or a clear sense of who is training the staff and what it means to have trained confidential staff, and how any of the questions that have been posed by everyone on this panel might even be taken up by these folks.
Yeah, another point that was in there was more than 20 organizations and apparent experts or groups were consulted. Okay, that's what the administrator said. Now, where did they consult the Hindu or the Indian groups here? We don't know, right? So it says more than 20 campus-based stakeholder groups, including insights shared by student advocates and academic and legal experts who raised awareness of caste-based discrimination in our community. What evidence did they bring? What awareness did they bring? And who are these groups? There are 20 campus-based stakeholder groups. Why weren't the Hindu students or Indian students, there are Hindu groups on campus, there are Indian groups on campus. Why weren't they included? Why wasn't there a conversation here? And the point that you made, Induji, earlier about trained confidential staff, this is what they're talking about, right? Which is this policy will be facilitated and implemented by trained confidential staff. Who is training these staff members? What do they know about caste? What do they know about Hinduism or India or any of the different cultures that form the greater Indian subcontinent? How much do they know? Is their understanding based on 6th grade textbooks that talk about Hinduism equals caste, or do they know anything else? Have they bothered to read anything else? So that's a very important concern that a lot of these kids have had, issues with.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question I have for students is, how does this policy affect your sense of freedom in being Hindu on campus?
I think for me, since middle school, which is when I first learned about caste in middle school, and it was the first time I was asked my caste, and I had no idea, but I've been trying to step away from it or distance myself from it in as many ways as possible, because when the word caste comes up, the first thing that people think about is Hinduism, even though it's not taught in Hinduism. And so we already try so hard to push ourselves away from this word caste or associating with it at all. And it's ridiculous that it just keeps coming back to bite us, because this can affect wanting to plan events or going to events like what happened at Davis. And this puts a target on our head as Hindus, because it creates this narrative that Hindus are all casteist. And as something that, we've been trying to run away from for so long, this just makes it so much worse. And you get nervous to say anything about Hinduism, because people will think that if you are a strong Hindu, then you must be casteist as well.
Adding on to that, it's also preventing us from practicing a religion on campus, or even wanting to go to different cultural events or Hindu events, just because various things there could be labeled as casteist. One thing that really stood out to me was that having only vegetarian food there could be considered casteist if a student decided to make an allegation against the whole event by saying that they were being casteist for not providing non-vegetarian food as well. That would be a valid claim. And I personally, it's kind of like, regardless of what we do, we may be labeled casteist for something that we were not aware of, and something that it wasn't our intention in the first place. And also, like, most of the times we don't know. I personally don't know any of my friends' castes. I learned that I don't even know the meaning of the word caste entirely. So for me, it's kind of like, how am I going to be casteist towards somebody whose caste I don't know, as well as, like, I don't even know the definition of the word caste. So how am I going to be casteist? And how is the school personally going to decide what the word caste even means in the first place? And how are they going to determine that I'm being casteist based on cultural beliefs, or just like cultural things that we're doing, because they think that it is discrimination?
I think something really dangerous about the way that caste is kind of tied in with Hinduism in schools is that it's always shown as a hierarchical or vertical graph, versus I had known a little bit about where my family came from, and it wasn't an identity that I wanted to run away from. It was an identity that I was proud of knowing, and I was lucky to share like an ancestry and know about my ancestry. But I believe that this change is going to cause some uncomfortable conversations for students on campuses, because a lot of students are not comfortable talking about topics like these, or maybe have no idea where their family comes from, and that's completely okay. And we're worried for other students on campus who may not even know about this change yet, because it could totally catch them completely off guard, because the school has still not notified all of the students of this change.
think the only thing that I see this as is something that will further push away students from Hinduism. Like it is already so hard to have Hindus that are strong about what they believe in. And adding these stereotypes will only make them think that if they become a stronger Hindu, they will be labeled as casteist, so they will push themselves further away from the religion. And Nikunji, I think you should also bring up the Davis situation and what happened, because to be completely honestly, it sounds ridiculous, but it actually happened, so it's important to talk about.
No, thank you for sharing that. So the parents need to know what happened at UC Davis. Around November 5th, when Hindus celebrate Diwali, there was a student-run student organization, a legitimate student organization at the campus of UC Davis that sent out a post calling to boycott Diwali. The post talked about how Hindu deities are Brahminical and casteist, and therefore by celebrating Diwali, you are endorsing violence against Dalits, against Muslims, against Sikhs, against Adivasis and other types of minority communities. And therefore, no one should celebrate Diwali, okay? So now if you have this type of an attitude on campus, you can understand that UC Davis passed a policy that prohibits discrimination based on caste or perceived caste. Now, if you think you are a genius and understand what caste is, please tell me what the heck is a perceived caste, okay? So this is the type of stuff that has been passed as policy at UC Davis, and a similar language is used in CSU. They're talking about caste. But as one of the students mentioned, if you are going to cater vegetarian food, if you are going to dress up in clothes that are, that are culturally connected to Hindus many different ways, you may be considered casteist, and they don't have to prove anything. They can just say, someone can just say, hey, you're being casteist, and they can file a complaint. The complaint may be dismissed, but somebody can take that on social media and essentially, basically label these students or the student organizations and stuff like that as casteist. So their reputation will already be tarnished. So this is the kind of environment. So, I wanted to thank student one for reminding me of talking about that. And this is a concern.
I want to ask a question just because it has to be asked, and I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it. One of the claims made, or the assertions made, is that Hindus who oppose this policy are just whining about not being allowed to discriminate anymore. Are you students against this policy because you want to be free to discriminate against people?
Okay, as I think I've said before, in case anyone didn't catch it, I'm not aware of my own caste. I'm not aware of anyone else's caste, as well as the meaning of the word caste itself. So I personally don't know how I can even discriminate against someone for their caste when I'm not even aware of what it genuinely means in its truest form. And also, I think the first time that caste was even introduced to me was in the United States school curriculum in 6th grade, when they decided that they wanted to connect Hinduism with caste. That was one of the only things we learned about Hinduism, is that we had caste. And I had to go home and ask my mom, what's my caste? And she was like, that's not even a caste, that's a varna. That's not your caste. And then, so I genuinely do not know my caste, and I will not be able to discriminate against anybody because I don't know their caste.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I really was worried about with this policy being implemented was people being taken advantage of. I personally have a lot of international friends, and I know how they're so scared to do anything as simple as going out with their non-international friends at night, because what if a police stops them saying, what are you doing so late at night? And they get in trouble and they get their papers away and they get sent home. A lot of these students are TAs because it gives them a leg up in terms of getting internships. And these students are trying so hard to just get through college. And this puts like a bright spotlight on them and a very easy way for them to get kicked out of the country by someone claiming that they're being casteist by giving them a grade that they don't like.
Yeah. Since this is a Hindu Parents Network event, webinar, I wonder if you have a message or something you'd like to say to the folks present here and just Hindu American parents at large.
I think, honestly, I'm a little frustrated because as someone who's between the ages of 18 and 21, I should not be having to do this. Like, I came to college to learn, to have fun, and the fact that I even have to be taking charge on this to get people to come to this is ridiculous in my mind. And it frustrates me that people are not putting as much effort as they can be into this situation. Like, if you do not raise your voice about this, it is going to be not only affecting your kids, but your grandkids, and it's going to be present everywhere in America. So it's frustrating that I have to spend my Tuesday night when I have school and classes and things to do talking about this, when parents should be taking the lead on this, because parents, we put our trust in you to protect us, to take care of us, and they're not doing enough to do that for us. And they're putting us a place where we're genuinely scared to talk about our religion or be proud of our religion or celebrate our religion out of the fear that we would be labeled a casteist.
Another thing that I wanted to bring to attention is that we have no confidence in the CSU trustees because they failed to perform their proper due diligence about the facts around the Cisco case, which has been used as a support to pass this CSU policy, even after public facts have shown that all top 3 positions in the case were given to Dalits by the manager who was accused of discrimination. They also ignored a petition that gathered 4,000 signatures and outreach by students and Hindu organizations. This basically means that our CSU trustees are not able to do their job of representing the students accurately and correctly. And I think in that case, the responsibility then falls onto parents because we can only do so much as students going to universities for fear that we will be discriminated against because of this action that we're taking to defend ourselves, or we'll be ostracized by our peers or our professors. And I personally think that parents have a little bit more power when it comes to that because they're not reliant on the university's students or the university's professors or university's board for their jobs or their livelihoods, as we are.
I honestly think that the students have the least power over everything as of how the policy has been passed and how infrequently we have been updated about this. And we do look to other role models in our community, adults, to kind of take the right action here. And there aren't too many universities who have passed a policy like this, but if nobody speaks up, it's only in time that it kind of spreads across the country. So if this is taken lightly here, then other universities and other places will find it easy to pass similar policies. So if there's a time to speak, it's now.
Shall we take yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I had one more question.
Yeah.
Do any of you know any Hindu professors at your institution, and have you had an opportunity to speak with them about their thoughts on this?
No, I honestly haven't, but I think if Hindu professors decided to all take a stand and say something about it, I really think it can do something, because from what I've learned being in college, Hindu professors in general are already treated not so great. So, like, this puts their job at risk, and this puts a direct target on them because anybody can say that a professor was discriminating against them if they do not get a grade they like. And something similar actually happened at Harvard, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, in the Harvard situation, what was interesting is that people said that certain professors spend more time with upper castes than with lower castes. So essentially Dalits were given less time versus upper caste students. So I wonder how the hell did people determine that? Was there like a guard standing outside the gate or the door of the professor's office and checking who is an upper caste, who's a lower caste? Was it by last name? Did they have like skin color? You know, all these different things that people are thinking about, right? So how did they determine which professor spend more time with one upper caste versus a lower caste? I mean, this stuff sounds ridiculous, but I want parents to understand this is happening. So you can close your eyes, you can close your ears, you can close your mouth, whatever you want, and pretend that this is not happening. Maybe your kids are not in college anymore, so you're like, I don't care. But guess what? You need to think about future generations. You need to think about current generation that is facing this onslaught of anti-Hindu sort of prejudice on campus, and the kind of the weaponizing of caste and the fault lines that exist in sort of the society are being used against us to essentially dismantle Hinduism in many ways. So, and this is not just small universities. These are large universities that are passing these policies. The CSU system has 23 universities, and there are 8 or so off-campus centers. So you're talking about 30 different institutions that have passed this thing based on a wrong understanding of the whole topic and not doing the due diligence.
Yeah.
I think we have some questions on the Q&A side. I don't know if we want to take a few. Let's see. I think we answered a bunch of them. Some people are saying, what can we do? I think there are a whole bunch of questions about that. Induji, do you have any thoughts on your end?
I think first is to really educate yourselves as parents on how discrimination policies work in the United States. I think it's really important to ground our arguments on the history of civil rights and discrimination policies in the United States. It doesn't make sense to argue this from the Indian sort of socio-political schema. So I would say at first level, just really educate yourselves about that, so that when you speak with someone, you're advocating from the same kind of historical and contemporary socio-political context. Because oftentimes I see where conversations kind of fall apart is because people are talking from 2 different countries. And we're in the United States, and this is all very much grounded in the United States. So understand the Civil Rights Act, understand Title VI, understand Japanese internment camps, understand, you know, the history of anti-Semitism. Just understand all of the different histories, and likely your children can educate you about that. So definitely turn to them, because they've been taught all of that in school here for sure. And then start to really unpack and get to, it's painful to look at these policies, to read them. They're not fun to look at, but I think it's really important to really be well versed in them. And then I think, you know, I think Aldrinji's point was really well taken, which is that there's no point in sort of arguing or going to battle against with folk who are invested in making this happen, right? So arguing with people on social media isn't going to do anything. But I think calling people into the conversation, people who are in your network who are not, well, first people who are Hindu and don't know this is happening, but then expanding those circles out to your friends who are members of other communities and educating them about what's happening and raising awareness, I think is all of these things are really, really important to changing public consciousness. So a lot of this is just riding on public consciousness that's been manufactured through the news media and through social media, and then just through repetition over and over again. I mean, this Equality Labs report has been used over and over and over again. And it's just like hearing a song on the radio. You hate it the first time, but after 20 times, you love the song and you can't stop singing it. It's an earworm. Like, they've created an earworm with this report. And so I think we just have to start buzzing in people's ears with completely different things. And I think you do that by calling in and not calling out. I think that's really important. And to do that, you have to understand the knowledge base that people are coming from, because this is about educating. So those are like first tier things that are kind of big. Nikunj, do you have any particular thoughts, through the vehicles that you have through CoHNA and HPN?
Yeah, no, those are good points. I think people, I would, like I said, to sound like a broken record, please join HPN, please join CoHNA, because we have to make the change happen. You can't expect us to just do everything, right? You got to be in it. You got to have your skin in the game, whether it's your money, it's your resources, your contacts, etc. If you have students going to CSUs, UC Davis, etc., if you are thinking about filing certain complaints in the universities and stuff, we can help you do that if that's something of interest. There are many different options that we can work on together. Education. I mean, we had about 125, 130 people attend today. We need thousands of people to learn about this, right? So if you can be the voice, I think that's really important too. And please donate, right? We're doing this nonprofit work. We're not getting paid. It's not our full-time job. So we need to create resources that can work on this more dedicated manner. So go to kohna.org/donate and press the donate button, donate generously, so we can support Hindu scholars who are working in this field. We can support some of these resources and other things that we're working on the ground.
So Nikunj, sorry, I'm kind of the guy behind the screens. There is one question that is on the panel that I would like to address to Dr. Viswanathan, which I think just kind of falls under her bailiwick. There's a Sashi Kusuma is asking the question. There seems to be a equity-based mass change in society in the US. How much do these socio-political movements in academia and the US political system impose or gently influence? So you are in academia yourself, you are in educational research. So I think your perspective on this would be very valuable.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. Is the question like, is this sort of trickling down from academia into sort of
that's how I interpret
this space?
You're right. Yeah, that's how I interpret it.
I think it is, but I think it is in the way that, for those of you who are in sort of the hard science or pharmaceutical or other types of research, you're probably very familiar with how research findings are distilled and distorted. And by the time they make it into media or the press, all of the conditions that surround a scientific finding have been eliminated. And it's like, if you eat this, then you'll live forever, which is not actually what the scientific finding was, right? But when it gets distilled and distorted and reduced and becomes sort of pop academia or pop theory, it just becomes it becomes overly simplistic and oftentimes gets put into these binaries. So I would say my conversations in certain places in academia where the academics are not identifying as activists, but very much are committed scholars, you're able to have nuanced conversations about equity and inclusion and limitations and frameworks and all of these things that nobody kind of reading a BuzzFeed article has the patience for. But by the time these ideas do trickle down into mainstream consciousness, they have been utterly reduced. And that's exactly what you're seeing at play here. I do agree with that. It is this highly reduced, overly simplistic, and oftentimes this very profound American narcissism sets in because everything here is black and white, because there is so much black and white here in terms of race and how race is defined, and in terms of the dominant religious paradigm is very black and white. And so then everything else in the world must also be like that. We read the world through the United States, including immigrant or diaspora communities that come from other parts of the world. We're going to read those ancient cultures through our American lens as well. So that's a really, really dense academic response to a thoughtful question. So I guess if I were to say in a nutshell, I don't think that equity and inclusion conversations on their own in academia are inherently bad, but I think the ways in which they get narrated and reduced and consumed and what they produce in society in these ways, is harmful.
Thank you.
So we're almost coming to a close. I'm just checking to see if there are any other themes in terms of There's a good one. The UC Davis resolution actually says a Hindu text like the Rig Veda do sanction caste. How do we respond to that? So I think I'll go first, and we've actually had a response to this because when we were first shocked. Anybody who says that this is all applies to all South Asians and this and that should just go and read the UC Davis resolution in the beginning when the students' body had passed it. It clearly blames Hinduism by citing the Rig Veda. So here's how we have answered this question. First of all, Rig Veda does not talk about caste. It talks about varna. And just because it talks about 4 varnas, there is no mention of any hierarchy in there. That's the first thing. The second thing is people love to selectively quote only one quote, but never read the next quote. So they talk about the Purusha being divided into parts, and the sort of the head becomes the Brahmin and the feet become the Shudras and things like that. But guess what? The next verse itself says that from the body emerged, from the mind emerged the moon, from the feet emerged the earth, so on and so forth. So now if we're going to imply hierarchy, you're going to say that moon is superior to the earth. I mean, that's a ridiculous kind of analogy if you want to think about it, right? So why then put that same thing there? The third thing is this verse about the 4 varnas is one verse out of 10,000 verses in the Rig Veda. So if you compare that to any other religious text or any other things that are even within other religions and stuff like that, there is no comparison. There's just one verse that is being used all the time to talk about, oh, there's an inherent caste discrimination. See, it goes all the way back to the genesis of Hinduism in that sense. So in short, Rig Veda does not subscribe or sanction any caste-based discrimination, whether you read it as the 4 varnas or the other way. It is also one of the only 10,000 verses. There is no other mention of any of this, the Chatur Varnas, anywhere else in the Rig Veda. And people selectively only quote one verse, but never look at the next verse, which also talks about how the moon and the earth and the sun, etc., emerge from different parts of the body. Okay, so this is something that we have been emphasizing, that people don't read. They love to just take one verse and then take it out of context and build an entire narrative around it. And I know, Sureshji, you also had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, the one thing that I always like to point out is, Brahmanos Yamakamasid is all fine and dandy, but I always ask people the question when they say that implies a hierarchy. I would say, if a doctor ever offered you a choice of saying, you either lose your hands or lose your feet, which would you prefer? Which is better to lose, your hand or your feet, your thighs or your head? Well, obviously you wouldn't want to lose your head, but as a EMT, I would say losing a thigh is pretty bad, right? So we have somehow managed to imply hierarchy based on an anatomical position of a highly stylized text, which starts Sahasra Shirisha Purushaha, right? It starts with the Purusha with 1,000 heads and 1,000 eyes, right? So it's a highly stylized verse, and to take that literally and say, because the head is above the shoulders and the arms, the head is superior to the arms is just foolishness, right? I mean, nobody in there, no traditional representation of the Rig Veda or any such work ever assigns hierarchy to this kind of thing. So this was, and again, we have the research to show this, but this was basically a translation made in the 17th and 18th centuries as, Western quote unquote scholars started discovering Hinduism, and they started applying this hierarchical things. So yeah, the answer to your question, yeah, do they sanction caste? No, because the word caste doesn't exist in Sanskrit. It never existed in Sanskrit till today it doesn't exist. And it's a Portuguese word. So how could it possibly sanction caste?
Yeah, and Aldrinji, your thoughts. I know you had some discussion. We have had some discussions around this too.
No, I'm agreeing with Krishnamurti ji that it also says the third of his Purusha is hidden. So how did you find the Pada? You see, you want to do literally what it says, then you go ahead and do it. And then we can sit down and have a conversation. If you're a scholar, be a scholar. Don't be this hypocrite who is using one line to be what you want to do, what you want to gain from it, and that's not going to be acceptable. And like I said, I mean, I will not even sit with them to talk about this. They're so below what Rig Veda is. I wouldn't even give them a second look at when they say something like that, because it's useless. I mean, like, and the other thing that Krishnamurti added, the caste is not even our word. It didn't even exist. You know, like my grandfather, mind you, he was a Christian. He took me, I grew up in a rural area in Kollega. He took me in the market, and then he showed me there's in all villages in Karnataka, there are places called Aralikatte. It's a banyan tree, and they build a platform around it. And he took me and he showed me this is where all kinds of students used to come, and they used to and the teachers used to come. The right teacher would come, and the right student would come, and they would learn from them. And there was no caste, no jati was ever taken, right? Because if you know something about rural areas in Karnataka, you can see how it is actually designed, right? So all these kind of things, these are the people who are ignorant, who, like I said, they're just virtue signaling themselves so that they can feel a part of whatever the majority tells them to be. So I think these kind of questions, it's a good thing that we have a rebuttal for it, but just among ourselves, I say anybody who take any Hindu scriptures, if they don't read it, understand it, and know the context of it, you don't even have to worry about what they're saying. But if you, I think, I always say this even in CoHNA, please go and read your scriptures, because your scripture is amazing. It's not Kakameni stories like the others, right? It has so much meaning, so much depth. It really enriches you. So please do go and read some of them.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think we're running out of time. So I'm going to give it back to Induji. Any last words or thoughts that you want to share?
Yeah, there was a really good question that came up, which was kind of around kids asking parents questions about, you know, discrimination that exists in Indian society. And I think what's really important to distinguish between are social structures that exist and social inequities that happen in any society, and what is sort of the foundation of Indology, of colonial scholarship, of colonialism on Hinduism, whether it's in India in the 18th, 19th, 20th century, or in the United States today, is this idea that Hinduism does not have any mechanisms within it to correct any kind of inequities within our own society, and that there needs to be an outside hand to correct us, because the entire principle of Hinduism is based on creating inequity, right? And so you can have inequities in the society, and certainly a country and a place that had $45 trillion stolen from it, there's going to be inequity in that society. It's going to take a beat to recover, and 70 years is not enough to recover from that kind of theft. Never mind the psychological distortions that happen in that time. But to say that that's the purpose of Hinduism is what is the issue here, right? And that we can't solve these problems ourselves, and that we don't have any mechanisms within our tradition. You know, exactly to Aldrinji's point, like, go to our scriptures. There's everything in there that tells us how to deal with these type of dilemmas, and to deal, I mean, the entire tradition is called Sanatana Dharma. The whole purpose is, what is dharma versus adharma? That's the entire premise of the whole thing. Not let's create this false sense of everything is perfect and pretend nothing is wrong. That's not the premise of the tradition at all. So that's what I would say.
And it's a very important point that Indraji just made. To illustrate that, there are a couple of immediate examples that come to mind. I don't know if many people here have heard of Manisha Panchakam. Manisha Panchakam was a small 5-stanza verse, which was composed by no other than Shankaracharya himself, Adi Shankara. And that Manisha Panchakam was the first, or I'd say it's one huge example of self-correcting, where even such a learned scholar, such as Shankara, could fall victim to his ego. And then he is taught that Chandalostu, Dvijalostu Chandalostu, whether you are a Dvijan or whether you are treated as a Chandala, as long as you have the spiritual practice, you are indeed my guru. right? So that is one of the examples of the self-correcting mechanisms that are throughout Hinduism. I mean, what Ramanujacharya did, what Shankara's followers have done over time, what Ramana did, we have so many examples of great leaders in Hinduism that have identified from time to time these kinds of inequities that creep into any society. And yet it has a very robust, very healthy self-correcting mechanism. We do ourselves an injustice when we leave those behind and look to an outside agency to come in and correct us, because then we are basically conceding that we don't know our own traditions. So one of our big goals in terms of educating, as Induji has pointed out, is to learn that we have very strong self-correcting mechanisms. Our ancient sages have thought through a lot of this stuff, and they have remedies for it, if only we would just go out and get them.
Exactly. So that's what so many sages, so many leaders, so many kings, so many queens, so many wonderful reformers have come from the tradition, rejuvenated it, corrected different inequities or social discrimination. In fact, we're going to be releasing a video or a two-part video that's going to be coming out with some infographics about exactly some of these things. But we can go on and on. I think we're almost there at 10:30 Eastern time, 7:30 Pacific. So I want to thank everyone, our esteemed speakers, Aldri Deepakji, Dr. Indu Vishwanathan, the wonderful students who took the courage to come out here and talk about this. I know they're concerned about what's going on campuses, but you have our support. We are with you. I know a lot of parents are with you also, so don't feel like you're singled out. We are there as a support mechanism for you.